Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third and final SMARTEES online seminar. We're happy and thankful that you chose to take some time out of your day to be here with us today. My name is Elma Meskovic, and I'm an Officer of Sustainable Mobility at ICLE European Secretariat. I have the pleasure of being your moderator for the next hour and a half. With me is my colleague Nicholas Mishkovsky, who I asked to just briefly wave into the camera. Nicholas is an Officer of Integrated Management also here at ICLE. And both of us have worked in the SMARTEES project together with our three wonderful speakers, whom I will introduce in just a minute. This seminar is organized as part of the SMARTEES project. SMARTEES stands for Social Innovation Modeling Approaches to realizing transition to energy efficiency and sustainability. Over the course of the last 3.5 years, the project has closely studied 10 successful cases of social innovation across Europe. These cases are grouped into 5 types of energy and mobility-related social innovation, which are illustrated on the slide here. In addition to analyzing barriers and factors that allowed for the successful innovation to take place, SMARTEES worked with the cities and islands to define alternative scenarios to simulate using agent-based modeling to see how the situation could have turned out differently had something been different. The project aims that the findings, something's wrong with the screen share. Sorry about this, 1 second. Okay, great. The project aims that the findings and outputs will support the energy transition and help cities to improve policy design. I won't go into the cases nor the clusters for the sake of the limited time we have, but if you are interested in this, please check out the website at the link below, as it contains a bunch of interesting information for you. The slide is not moving. Nicholas, are you able to press? For some reason, it's not moving on my screen. In the world of technology, this was bound to happen.
Yeah, let me try. We're just still trying to get our last panelist on board. So this might create some additional hiccups here. Does it work now? No. Okay, let me briefly stop this.
Sorry for this, everyone. Okay, now I see it. Okay, as I said, this seminar is part of a SMARTEES webinar series or seminar series. The first seminar focused on how local governments can help residents to become local heroes. And the second one discussed how to implement social innovation at various levels of society. And the seminar today will discuss whether and how computer simulations make transitions more successful. And we will also take the opportunity to present the Policy Sandbox Tool, which is one of the main outputs of the SMARTEES project. This is our program for today. So I'll spend another minute or so with the welcome and housekeeping. Then we will hear from Isabel Lema Blanco, who I hope is with us. There was some technical difficulty early this morning. And Isabel will provide an overview of the policy scenario workshops that were implemented within the project and discuss how they are important for agent-based modeling, as well as a city strategic urban planning. After that, we will have a presentation on the SMARTEES Policy Sandbox Tool by Nicholas. And this will also then give you an opportunity to test the tool on your own in a 5-minute short exercise. Then we will move on to a presentation by Loes Bouwman from the University College Groningen in the Netherlands. And she will present on a basic agent-based model that has been adopted for the case of Budapest After that, we will engage in a short discussion with the Smartees cities, so the reference cases as well as the follower cities, about the Policy Sandbox tool and the approaches that we used in the project. But this discussion, we will then also open up to everyone in the audience. So I kindly ask everyone for the next hour and a half. Of course, there are always distractions, but if we can, I'll just focus for the next hour and a half on the webinar. Maybe leave the emails for a bit later. That would be greatly appreciated so that we can have a great discussion. Then our final presentation will be by Trevor Graham from Urban Island, and he will present the Policy Sandbox tool service options that are available to cities even beyond the Smartees project. And yeah, we'll have a short question and answer, and then we will close the session with a wrap up. So we want to interact with you as much as possible today. And in order to ensure smooth and easy participation throughout the event, I want to just briefly highlight some tips that might be useful. You should hopefully see a control panel to the right of your screen. At the top left, there's a microphone button that should be marked in orange to indicate that you are muted. If anyone would like to directly ask a question to the speakers or contribute to the discussion, you can request to be unmuted by raising your hand. We will then unmute you and call on you to speak. And as we are a very small group today, it would be great to hear from you directly if that's possible. To raise your hand, simply click on the hand icon that's located one button below the microphone. Just don't forget to put your hand down after you have asked a question or contributed. And to do this, you simply just click on the hand icon again. You are also, of course, welcome to write your question or comment instead if you prefer. You can do this in the question box at the bottom of the control panel. It's important that you know that this seminar is being recorded and will be published online and added to the Smartees website to make it available for anyone else that might be interested in the topic. If you don't want to be in the recording, please don't unmute yourself and let myself or Nicholas know in the chat during the event, or just send us an email after. If you happen to have any other questions regarding data protection, you can contact our data protection officer at the email address written on the slide. So we are running a bit behind schedule, and I think I've definitely spoken enough and maybe a bit too much for now. I see that we have Isabel. So I would now like to introduce our first speaker, Isabel Lema Blanco. Isabel is a research associate at the People Environment Research Group at the University of A Coruña, where she's also a lecturer. Her research interest lies in the motivational and social learning processes of empowering citizens in sustainable transition. And Isabel was involved as a researcher in the Smartees project, and she, along with the rest of the team at the University of A Coruña, led the activity on participatory policy scenario development. So Isabel, welcome, and the floor is yours. I will, Isabel, can you try to unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. And I would like to share the presentation, but I think that I have not the permissions for doing that. So maybe, Elma, can you share the presentation instead of me? And I will indicate you when you have to move forward to the next slide.
Sure. Just give me 1 second. Let me pull it up. Or Nicholas, if you already have it open, if you can share it. Isabel, do you see the presentation?
Yes, I see. Yeah, perfectly. Well, the topic of my presentation is to give a short overview of policy scenario workshops and its relevance for age-based model in the context of energy-related social innovations. So, first of all, we want to conceptualize what policy scenarios are. Next slide, please. Policy scenarios are descriptions of alternative visions that put the focus on key processes and decision points that aim to understand the barriers and also the challenges to energy transitions, and consist of a reflexive exercise on the past, the present, and the future policy alternatives. So policy scenarios aim to support policy action because they try to elucidate different realistic futures, providing alternative images of future development that contribute to design best strategies to engage citizens in sustainable transitions and in the context of the SMARTEES project, specifically energy-related social innovations. Next slide, please. Thus, in the SMARTEES project, we have elaborated a now definition of social innovation in terms of the processes of change in social relationships, in interactions, and or the sharing of knowledge that broadens or deepens the engagement of individual stakeholders, individual citizens, and collectivities with energy topics, and that leads or is based off new sustainable ways of producing, managing, consuming energy in order to meet societal challenges. This is our definition, and also we want to conceptualize what social acceptability is, because this was the topic of the policy scenarios. Social acceptability is a broad term that refers to citizens' general evaluation of an energy policy or a specific energy project. But however, policy approaches often understand public acceptability as a passive, low-conflict endorsement of energy-related policies and interventions. However, for us and for social innovations, social acceptability involves both the adoption of a new normal, the adoption of a new social innovation, a new energy project, for example, but also involves the citizens' engagement in transformative change. So for us, social acceptability involves an active behavior from citizens and active support as well. We have identified in the SMARTEES project specific processes, social and empowerment dynamics that predictably lead to acceptability and endorsement, or to the lack of this social endorsement as well. Next slide, please. We want also to present briefly what is the method approach to that we have used in SMARTEES, because policy scenarios built in an intense research and empirical work, which consisted first in the conduction of in-depth interviews in all the case studies. We organized several policy scenario workshops and seminars in different meetings organized in the context of the SMARTEES project. Also, we conduct a survey, a specific survey in several cities and islands involved in the SMARTEES project. And also, we conduct the first round and the second round of multi-stakeholder deliberative policy scenario workshops that were organized in autumn of 2020 and in the spring of 2021. And finally, we test the impact of the alternative policy scenarios co-created in these policy workshops through agent-based simulations tools. So, next slide, please. The multi-stakeholder deliberative policy scenario workshops encourage creative thinking, strategic thinking, engaging a diversity of factors, for example, social innovation practitioners, policymakers, experts, supporters, beneficiaries, and so on, in deliberative activities oriented to collective explore alternative approaches and solutions to increase citizens' involvement in local energy social innovations and wider adoption of sustainable energy-related behaviors. Thus, such deliberative policy scenario workshops are based on the participation of a diversity of actors that have a profound knowledge on the development of the social innovation, and also provide different approaches that help to figure out alternative avenues to deal with the challenges, the barriers, and also the opportunities to engage citizens in social innovations and to increase social acceptability. Next slide, please. This map is our map of the SMARTEES project, in which we identify the different cities and islands, the pioneer cities and islands that were involved in the SMARTEES project. And in all of them, we organized these policy scenario workshops. In each specific case, in each specific city or islands, we organize one or two policy scenario workshops in which we identified first which are the relevant actors to participate in the workshop, and also we identify the different relevant dimensions that are specific for each city. So these policy scenario workshops follow as well this case-embedded approach. Next slide, please. We have no time today to introduce a very large description of the policy scenario workshops and the protocol of the policy scenario workshops, but I like to say that these policy workshops consisted of structured iterative processes of deliberation involving small groups and plenary sessions, individual reflexive work and visioning exercises aiming at learning for the experience and developing a series of alternative policies based on the diverse perspective and backgrounds involved in the workshops. Thus, the protocol has three different goals. The first one is framing the workshop discussion and understanding the relevant dimensions. For example, the key factors, the processes, the tipping points, the critical events for the social innovation. Also, we wanted to identify the main lessons learned in the design and implementation of this social innovation in each case, in each city or island. And also we ask the participants to identify alternative pathways, answering, for example, the question, what could be done differently in the past in order to overcome the barriers, the difficulties that we faced, or in order to take advantage of the possibilities that were open to the promoters, for example. And finally, we envision the future, with participants identify the barriers and drivers, set the goals of the future implementations of these social innovations, for example, the replication of a superblock in a city or the expansion of an renewable energy project in an island, and participants co-define together future policy strategies. Next slide, please. This figure represents an overview of the protocol for organizing the policy workshops. It is structured in 8 phases, combining, as I said before, plenary sessions and small group sessions. As you can see, phase 1 consists of framing the workshop discussion. Phase 2 discuss the lesson learnings. And finally, we envision the future scenarios. We define the alternative policy scenarios. That is the topic of the presentation presentation today. And finally, we go forward to the conclusion. And next slide, please. In order to present the alternative policy scenarios that were co-produced in the different policy workshops, we want to say that we identified key dimensions that were addressed in these policy scenario workshops. Key dimensions involve factors, involve tipping points, involve key elements that were essential for increasing social acceptability or for facing social contestation, for example, in each specific case. We found different key dimensions, but we have to say the participatory processes and also addressing social and experiential needs were central dimensions that were addressed in most of the cases that we studied in this project. Next slide, please. With the results of the policy scenario workshops, we obtained a series of alternative policy scenarios that were forward tested in agent-based simulations. Social simulations explored what-if scenarios. So what had happened if alternative policy routes were taken in the past? These scenarios were further refined with the participants in a second round of policy scenario workshops that were conducted in spring 2021 with the main reference cases. And we discussed with the cities, with the islands, how to foster broad social acceptability. And as a result of this exercise and as a result of the agent-based simulations, we obtained a series of policy recommendations, and also we distilled the best strategies to engage and empower citizens in energy transitions. Next slide, please. This table shows what have been the main alternative scenarios that were modeled in the 5 clusters of social innovations. As you can see, for example, local media communication strategies focused on the affirmation of the benefits of the social innovation was addressed in the cluster 1. Targeted communication strategies addressing social and experiential needs were addressed in cluster 2 and 4. Participatory approaches to increase citizen support was an alternative scenario implemented in several cases. Also, awareness-raising campaigns, legislative scenarios, and new technologies. As you can see in the SMARTEES project, we developed plenty examples of what alternative scenarios could be implemented in the different cases. Next slide, please.
Isabel, just sorry to interrupt, but we're running a bit behind. If we can wrap up in the next maybe 2 minutes, that would be great.
Yes, okay, I will forward. I go too fast. Okay, the result of that is that, for example, I want to give just 3 examples of how these policy scenarios were implemented. For example, in the clusters of superblocks in Vitoria-Gasteiz and Barcelona, and also in El Hierro, policy scenarios revolve around 3 alternative policy strategies. For example, what would happen if we had implemented more intense and meaningful participatory approaches in the co-designing of the social innovations? What would happen if the cities and Iceland would have implemented targeted communication strategies addressing social and experiential needs that appear to be very relevant for citizens according to the survey that we conducted in these cities, for example, in Vitoria-Gasteiz, in Barcelona, in El Hierro, and also awareness-raising campaigns. So next slide, please. These are examples. I'm not going to describe that, but these are examples of how we test the different scenarios and how the different lines of the viewer represent to what extent implement one or another policy scenario have a very relevant impact in terms of the public support towards, for example, the superblock policy or towards renewable energy projects in El Hierro. Next slide, please. We can go forward. The next one, this is another example of another test, and this is another example, but we can go really quick to the conclusion. Yeah. Okay, so in conclusion, we have to say that agent-based simulations are promising expert tools in the service of decision making that in our experimentations show that serve to experiment and test the effects of alternative policy avenues on overall public acceptability. And also, multi-stakeholder deliberative policy scenario workshops can be useful tools to encourage creative strategic thinking and support policy action as the result of our project, as we saw in our project. And finally, we have to stress that the combination of policy scenario workshops and agent-based model can be an useful, participatory, innovative, reflexive thinking tool in local contexts where energy transition goals have been set. And finally, next slide, please. If you are interested in knowing more about how policy scenarios have been developed, we are about to publish a handbook for the development of policy scenario workshops supporting energy transitions. And also we have delivered the report, the SMARTEES report, deliverable 5.2, policy recommendations for each cluster of case studies. I think both documents, both reports are being uploaded to the SMARTEES website soon. So in a more extensive way that I did in this short presentation today, you can find out the main results of our work in policy scenarios and agent-based models. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really happy to listen to your comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for the insightful presentation. We're very happy to have you with us and to learn about this from you. Does anyone have any questions for Isabel? I think we have time to take one or two questions for now. So far, I don't see any. We have one.
I do see one, which
yes,
is
Sarah.
from Sarah, and I'm going to unmute you right now.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, I have a question about I found super interesting to see this last graph that Isabel you shared, and I will be curious to know then about these parameters of participation. What is behind, if there is also a critical mass of citizens involved or on this participation process, or if it's about the diversity, the type of stakeholders that are involved in this participation process. So just to have a little bit more of the determinants behind this significant difference in results that are really interesting.
I don't know if you, Elma or Nicholas, can go to the specific slide. I think is slide 13 or no, the one before, the first one, I think. Okay.
Exactly, this one.
Yes, exactly. Okay. We test to what extent the impact of citizen engagement in the designing of energy-related policies in in super blocks, for example, or in El Hierro, I think there is a mistake because the figure represents public support to super blocks, not El Hierro. I'm sorry for this mistake. But answering your question, thank you very much for the question. What we find out, not just in super blocks in Vitoria-Gasteiz, but also in El Hierro, but also in Barcelona, in the case of Barcelona, that more implementing more intense and meaningful participatory approaches in co-designing of energy projects increases substantially public support towards the super blocks policy, for example, as this graphic, as the figure shows. But what is very interesting is that if participatory processes are largely displayed and sustained over time, the support rises, for example, in a more substantial way, even if participatory processes engage not only typical stakeholders or usual stakeholders like trade unions, local associations that are usually involved in the formal participatory strategies that most of the cities develop currently. But if an intense participatory approach aims to involve normal citizens, aims to involve residents in the neighborhood, for example, the support towards superblock increases so much. Why this happened? Because participatory processes are a new normal. And is, as you say, is a must for the implementation of social innovations. But the objectives, the goals of the participatory should be engaging citizens in real co-designing of the project, of the superblock in the neighborhood, of the renewable energy project in the island, of the sustainable mobility plan in the city. So to more extensive and intense citizens are engaged for a long period of time, and the promoters also inform them and keep them on the loop, even in the evaluation and monitoring of the implementation of the social innovation. That is crucial for sustaining social acceptability over time and support the expansion, the replication of pilot projects across the city, for example.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question, and also thank you, Isabel, for this very detailed explanation. We had one more question, but I think due to time, Aita, if it's okay, I will keep this question for later. We'll come back to it in the end, but for right now, I suggest that we move on to Nicholas, as he will present the Policy Sandbox tool.
All right, thank you, Alma. I hope you can see me, everyone. And yeah,
Yes.
Sorry, Isabel, for not having been able to show you also with a video. By the way, talking about that, I also saw that from Barcelona, we have Ariadna Miguel and Xavi Valls. I hope I pronounced your names more or less correctly. You're also on the attendee list. I will try to make you presenters soon, so you can also join potentially with camera for the panel discussion. But for now, let me continue with the next slot, which is about the Policy Sandbox tool. Maybe for those who are not too familiar with the project yet, so what Isabel described, all these policy scenarios were part of a data that fed into these models, which try to simulate computer-based simulation, simulate these social innovation dynamics researched in the different cases. And what we also did is that we tried to put like a easy to use online tool on the website, which is going to be published very soon by the end of this week. And this tool is supposed to be a teaser for what this modeling can do, and also try to capture what the research and the outcomes of some of these policy scenario workshops were. So this tool is the so-called Policy Sandbox Tool. The aims were to simulate these effects of these social innovations, as I said. One key aim was also to support local governments in making decisions related to their energy and mobility transitions, and potentially use this tool as a first insight in how this could be done. And yeah, so the tool aims to enable the user to explore social dynamics. And I think also Isabel mentioned that this is what SMARTEES try to find out: how are social dynamics developing throughout social innovation experiments or actions. We tried to create a user-friendly tool, but you'll find out in a minute yourself if this is the case. And yeah, we try to make it usable for a wide range of European cities. In the end, we picked a small number for feasibility reasons, but we tried to spread across different areas in Europe. And this is what it will look like. So you've seen the similar map already in the presentations now. Here you can see that we restricted the tool to a handful of cases, and will actually be 4. And yeah, we want you to basically explore this for yourselves now. Elma will share a link in the chat very soon. And one thing maybe to remember when you go through, it consists of 2 parts. The first part is the reconstruction of the cases in a chronological order. So this is based on the qualitative research done. And this is basically a storytelling. So you will have different descriptions about context factors, about actors that were involved, about different activities that contributed to the social innovation in the case. And then at the end of this timeline that you will have, there's an exploration part. And this is then where these policy scenarios implemented in model runs will be visible. And they're always commented on by a modeler to make them more comprehensive. And yeah, and this is how the tool works. And you will probably not be able to really go into full depth and read everything, or even watch all the videos. So maybe what we recommend is that you just pick one of the cases and just browse through. We will give you 5 minutes for that, and I think that should be fine to get a first impression. And yeah, then with that, we continue in the program, but I think that's all I need to say now. Elma, do we already have the link in the chat?
Yes.
Okay, about to. Yeah, it's in the yeah, okay, I see it. It's in the in the chat now. Okay, great. Okay, thanks. So 11:40. So I will also just browse along with you and take a look at the tool, and reconvene at 45 to 46. All right, so we're at 11:45. I'll give you another minute or so. Oh, now it's 46. Then maybe you try to finish with wherever you stopped. And yeah, I hope this little exercise gave you a brief impression of what the tool can do and how it basically describes these cases and the different dynamics it entails. So, I mean, you have the link now, so feel free also after the presentation, after the online session, to still browse through. It's not yet public, so we might still do some changes, but it will go online very soon. The next presentation will be by Luis Baumann, but I will hand over to Elma first. And we'll continue a little bit on the modeling side in the project.
Great, thank you, Nicholas. I hope you were all able to go through at least one of the cases to get to know it a bit better and get an impression of what the tool is about and what it offers. If you have any comments about the tool and want to share your impression, please do so in the questions box. We would love to receive these. For right now, we're not going to take any questions, but do include them in the questions box. I would say we move on to the next presentation. And with this, I would like to welcome our second speaker, namely Luis Baumann. Luis is a researcher at the University College Groningen in the Netherlands, and more specifically at the Groningen Center for Social Complexity Studies. Her research has focused on social and behavioral science and research, and Luis joined the SMARTEES project about a year ago, and her main activity has focused on simulating social innovation in alternative policy scenarios. So, Luis, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. Today, I will be presenting a model on Budapest. This is, I will share some slides. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, that's good. So we have been modeling in cluster 1 of the SMARTEES project, for instance, for Groningen, which focuses on holistic mobility plans. In this cluster, we are interested in simulating citizens' preferences on how, for instance, a social innovation like closing a main road in a park for cars is perceived by citizens, and how policy interventions would have been able to make a difference in that. Now, in the SMARTEES project, we've developed a very extensive model for Groningen, in which we implemented many scenarios. And one of the interesting next steps that we are taking is trying to see how versatile this model is. One of our following cases that we recently started to cooperate is Budapest, and 3 weeks ago we were challenged with the task to see, can we adopt our model to the case of Budapest to see how the citizens there express their preferences on closing also a prominent street in the main park in Budapest for car traffic. In this presentation, I give 2 very brief recaps of the Groningen and the Budapest case, but I also would be happy to refer to the website and to the Policy Sandbox Tool that you were just introduced with, because we have some very intuitive videos on the agent-based models over there. Next, I also briefly walk through the architecture that we use to make this agent-based model for Groningen and also for Budapest. And next, I will be showing you the first results that I have been able to simulate for the Budapest model. I also show results of 2 policy interventions that we implemented and some next steps to improve the model and what we could do in the future. So a quick recap on the Groningen case. The Groningen case is part of the Holistic Mobility Plan, and in Groningen since the 70s, the local government started to implement so-called traffic circulation plans, in which they wanted to give more priority to both cyclists and pedestrians in the city. One of the major implementations in the Groningen case is that in the important park at the heart of the city, they closed a major road for car traffic. They started with a very long process in discussion with citizens, but also with policymakers. And in 1993, they did a pilot. So they closed temporarily the park for car traffic, and later held a referendum to ask citizens, would you prefer to have the park closed for cars or keep it open? This referendum in 1994 resulted in a 50.9% favor of permanently closing the park for cars. So from then onwards, the park is closed for cars. However, this was a pretty close call, and in our agent-based model, we simulate how citizens could have been influenced in being more or less in favor in that. So we kind of experiment with how we could have involved citizens more to have more pronounced opinions about this. In Budapest, a very similar case is developing. Also, here you see a map of the main park in Budapest, where they also wanted to close a park for cars, and only recently the government finalized this decision for permanent closure. So what we in SMARTEES try to do is build a model for Budapest to see how citizens view this closure and how this could have been influenced with policy scenarios. So how to do that in this agent-based model? Well, SMARTEES developed an architecture called UMAT that combines various types of data and theories in an agent-based framework. This so that we can simulate how agents, so people in Budapest or in Groningen, make decisions about the specific case. To do so, we have to account that people have their own opinions and they have their own characteristics. They have, for instance, a network that they belong to, and they speak with different people about how they feel about closing the park for cars. So the main task that agents, but also in real life people had here is deciding, would I prefer a car-free park or would I prefer a car-full park? This is not always a straightforward answer for everyone, and there are many aspects involved in how people would make these decisions. So how do they decide? Well, they have to ask themselves, which options has more pros for me? And how confident am I that this final decision will also be in my benefits? And then they have to remove all the doubts before they decide what it will be. A key aspect in making this decision is motives that you have. Motives are things that are important to you and that drive your attitudes and make you decide what would be the best situations for you. So also our artificial residents in this agent-based model have motives about this. In the Budapest model, we include three key motives about whether people want to close the park for cars or not. The first one is enjoyment of the park, so whether they go there for activities, how important being in the park or having this park free of car traffic is to them. Second motive that is of key importance is the value towards sustainable future of Budapest. And the third one is the importance of having access by car to the inner city, because as you can see on this map, the park is very close to a main motorway. And if this road is closed, maybe it takes longer to get from certain neighborhoods to the inner city. That can be important for deciding whether you want to close the park or not. To simulate more how citizens would make this decision, we of course have to give them all sorts of characteristics that could play a role in this. We used census data and we included, for instance, gender, age categories of the different people that can have a vote, their main activity, how many of them are actually students, and where they live. For this, we used the census data from 2016 and microcensus data also from 2016 in which education and age profiles are nested. And we used data on motives to give a little bit more weight to the citizens, the opinions that they actually have in real life about closing this park for cars. The social demographic overview of Budapest looks like this. We see per district the size of the district. Per district we see the composition of educational attainment, how many of these populations are actually students, and the age composition per district. This is important. This may be important for district differences in how they would vote in this manner. So in only 3 weeks' time, we were able to get a running model and also to make some predictions, but we didn't have time yet to implement the GIS, but to still give you an intuitive idea how it would look like, I used a very basic picture of Budapest. In the middle, you see a square outlined with red. This represents the park, and around the park are the neighborhoods that are more or less close to the park. So in our basic run in the model, we see that only 45% wants to keep the park open for cars. Currently, this has to do with how we calibrated the model with the information from 2016, in which people expressed interest in closing the park for cars, but combined with the motives that they have and the people that they have talked to and how they were influenced, it seems that in this model, most of the people would still prefer to keep the park open for car traffic. There's a difference between districts. You can, for instance, see that in District 5, only 45% would prefer to close the park for cars. But that's, for instance, in District 6, overwhelming 60% of people would prefer to close the park for car traffic. We thought about alternative policy scenarios that could in fact affect how people think about this. And the first scenario that is often used in the SMARTEES project, developed in also other workshops that were conducted, real life workshops. And one of the interventions that we implemented is a positive scenario. So what if the municipality would campaign actively informing citizens on the benefits of having a closed park for cars? And this is a very effective campaign. If citizens are exposed to information on the benefits of closing this park for cars, or we see that it changes to a 59% majority vote to close the park for cars. We also did an opposite policy intervention. What if many citizens and also mobility related companies campaign on why this road needs to remain open to ensure mobility within the city? We see that we go back to the more default state, and that is that there's a 45 or majority that wants to keep the park open for car traffic. As I said before, well, we were challenged with building this model in only 3 weeks. We can already see that we can have some idea what policy interventions might do, but in the future, we would like to work with richer nested data to give our agents a little bit more information, a little bit more background, so that they can better make decisions. We need to calibrate the districts a little bit further because we now had information on the basic composition of the districts, but there could be much more informative, both qualitative and quantitative data to calibrate districts and also motives that people have for keeping the park open. Of course, we would like to include GIS mapping to get the more beautiful and more intuitive pictures that we use also in the sandbox tool. And furthermore, once we have these things done, we would like to test the model for sensitivity. So and check process validation, so we make sure that we can say with a little bit more certainty that these simulations give us meaningful information. And of course, we can think about adding more policy interventions and do more large-scale simulations. Many thanks for now.
Great, thank you so much, Luj. We are definitely running a bit behind on time, but this is good because we received a lot of information. I would say for right now, we skip the questions because we do have a 15-minute slot in the end where we can discuss a bit more questions that are specific to the presentations. But for right now, I would actually like to already go into the discussion. We've prepared some questions that we wanted to ask our panelists, and today we're fortunate to have Budapest and Barcelona as our panelists. So I think I would actually start off with you. So maybe, I guess, since the presentation we just heard had to deal with the Budapest basic model, my question is then to Tunde. Do you think the agent-based modeling and the policy sandbox tool could be something that's useful for Budapest and the policy and decision-making in your city? And what has the process been like in the last few weeks with this exchange of information to develop this basic model?
Okay, hi, thank you, Alma, and good day for everyone. My name is Tunde Hajna, and I'm working for BKK Center for Budapest Transport. I'm responsible for the planning processes of Budapest Mobility Plan. For the planning, we have to develop our public discussion policies, and I think we can use these tools. But actually, this pilot was very interesting, and the first time we saw the results, and thank you for Luz to make it very very plastic and very nice to see. And I also want to introduce my colleague. She's Dana, and she was working with Luz, and she's responsible for the mobility plans, monitoring, and evaluation processes. So I really hope that we can use this model. And I also want to mention that we had changes last year in the city hall. So the new city government has a dedicated deputy mayor for public discussions, and because they are open and because they are really support this kind of methods, I'm very happy to participate in SMARTEES and to have this pilot. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no, we're happy to also have you with us and to also have this opportunity to develop this basic model. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it was to gather the data to then input into the basic model? Did you think it was more complicated than you expected, or did you think actually the transfer of information was easy enough to still be able to get useful information for the city?
It depends how detailed you go. So in 3 weeks' time, of course, it wasn't a big challenge. But if you want to see the results more detailed, and if you want to contain all the agglomerations, so not only the districts around, but the surrounded area of Budapest, which is also very important because in this park, the highway of motorway of M3 almost goes through the city center. So not only the surrounded districts are our stakeholders, but we have to make it a little bit larger, the scale. So it would be a bigger challenge. But I think the result was very impressive for this time.
Thank you so much for providing us with your perspective on this. It's also very important for us to hear. And maybe as we also have Barcelona joining us as a panelist, I would like to propose the same question to you, especially as Barcelona has been a reference case in the project and has been involved a bit more deeply in the modeling as well as the policy scenario workshops. Ariadna, or I see that Xavi is also here, if you would like to also quickly just comment on whether you think that the agent-based modeling in the Policy Sandbox tool could be beneficial for policy and decision making in Barcelona. I think, Ariadna, if you are able to unmute yourself, I think Nicholas has given the rights. I see a hand raised.
Yeah, I see it says not connected to audio, so I'm not sure if I can fix that on my side. Ariadna, maybe you can just check your audio settings. But I see that Xavi is also here and he's unmuted, so maybe you want to say something.
Hi. For me, just saying it that for some thing about language, it's a bit difficult to follow all the things or all the meanings about you say. Is my problem for my English level. But about the question you say, and also if Ariana wants also to say something later. We are doing all the planification of super blocks and also the participation that we do in different areas. That it starts in one area where we begin, and it moves around, growing up to do the super blocks project, all around the area, more or less the area where we start. That's the process that we are following now to move on the project of super blocks. And in this case, I think that a tool like the panel is very useful, because everything that we learn, or that we get in one area, we can process in another one to get the analysis or the participation questions of things that we used to work with the neighbors, but that we have learned, that we have the diagnosis of the first area. So in just saying that one tool that maps all the information that you have and permits to work with this information in the neighborhood behind, or the next neighborhood, is very, very useful. And in this case, in the same meaning that we did a process, a method that we learned in the first super blocks area, and that we make it better in the second one, having tools that make us give an impression to have more information in the different areas that we are going. It's very, very useful. Just in this case, if you want to ask to more things, you can me ask.
Thank you so much, Xavi. And I see that Ariadna has also raised her hand.
Yeah, sorry, because I have a lot of problems to connect to the webinar, and I am with the mobile phone, and I have some problems with the sound. Sorry. I will say this the same that Xavi said. That I think that we have to study a little bit more how it's working, this model, and how are the all the how it works. But now for us, I think that it would be useful for this thing that we are implementing the superblocks in all the city, in other new areas. So have these tools, and I think that it will be useful. And well, I'm sorry because I haven't heard all the presentation of Isabel, but I heard the question, and the last question that they asked. that someone asked to Isabel, and she said that when as more participation you are doing, more acceptation, more the people accepts the project, we have feel of this in our skin, how this is true. No? So I agree with Isabel that it's important to do a very good participation process. As more people get involved, more people get agree with the project.
Thank you so much, Ariadna, and I'm happy that the microphone decided to work in the end so that we could hear your input. I've seen that we had a hand raised from Isabel. Did you want to add something, Isabel?
Yes, I have to add that we have developed a policy scenario workshop with Barcelona, of course, and also we have implemented several of the policy scenarios, alternative policy scenarios that participants like Xavi, for example, Rosa, Ariadna, and other stakeholders co-produced in the policy workshop. And we have implemented that a variation of these scenarios in the model, but we have not the chance yet to present the result of these policy scenarios to Barcelona. So I know that Shari and Ariadna are very willing to know the results, the outcomes, and also to discuss to what extent have been implementing a more broad participatory approach, and also change the communication strategy, for example, in the case of on the pilot case of superblocks, could have helped them to avoid social contestation. So we are having a specific second workshop next week. And that is the reason they are asking us for see to what extent this tool can help them, because we have not yet the opportunity to show them the results, because developing these policy scenarios and also implementing in the models and testing the different alternatives in the model takes a lot of time and needs plenty sources of information, data gathering, qualitative and quantitative sources in our case, and the results I have to advance that are very promising, because some of the approaches that we have implemented show that the social acceptability in Paulenau can vary up to 22%. So this is when you are measuring to what extent public vote for super vote, 22%, increasing 22% the public support is relevant rate as you can see.
Great, thank you, Isabel. Right now it's almost 12:15. We have a list of questions that we wanted to ask during this panel discussion. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get through all of them, but I did want to take the opportunity and ask just one more question. And I would propose maybe we go first with Budapest and then with Barcelona, and then also open it up to the other cities, because I see that Groningen is also here, as well as Aberdeen, and we would also love to hear from you. But what are the challenges that you see with using agent-based modeling or tools like this? Where do you see the limitations for your city, whether it's resources or maybe data or anything like this? Yeah, what do you think are the challenges for this? So Tunde, if you want to give it a go first.
I give the word to Diana, because she was involved more, so she can speak more about this question.
Hi everyone. I think definitely one of the challenges was data collection, especially in the case of Budapest, because the city itself is not collecting this sort of data. So we have to rely on national data collection measures and possibilities. Then you can see we have certain socio-demographic data, especially data such as educational attainment levels or household compositions only from census, which is conducted every 5 years. So that's definitely a challenge. One of the challenges for, or in terms of data, was to gather data that gives some kind of data on different opinions and different behaviors. So we were trying to look up opinion polls about topics such as the closing of the city park itself and the renewal process of the city park, or opinions on sustainability and green surfaces in Budapest. And it was very hard to find this kind of data, to find data that is up to date, because a lot of the data was from 2016, 17. So I think the data collection and all the inputs of the model is a little bit challenging, but I'm looking forward to work on these issues and try to solve these issues together in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diana. And then if we can also have someone from Barcelona comment on this. And then I actually have another question that I would like to close off, because I understand that closing off with the challenges might not be the most positive thing to do. So yes, if someone from Barcelona could also answer this question, what did you find to be the most challenging, or what do you think are the challenges with ABM in using it for your cities?
In the case of Barcelona, I think that it's the same, that the challenge or the difficulties that we have to have data, no, because it's very hard to count and to have. It's very expensive, no, and it's a new technology, no, how to have this data, and we are learning, no, how to have all this information. I think that it's a challenge that it's common in all the cities. And also I think that I have a lack of information, no, about this modeling, and that, as Isabel said, but I imagine that it's difficult to measure how the different politic campaigns. I don't know how to say it, but that sometimes it's very hard, it's difficult to know where, how they are. Sorry, because I have some problems with the phone, and I'm a little bit I have the head in another place. What I want to say is that it's difficult to know this when you are in a politic campaign, no, some medias are modifying the opinion of the citizen. So I think that this is difficult to to put in the model, because sometimes, no, you cannot control this the media, no, that the political interests, no. That I think that now it's happening this in Barcelona, no, that we have a very strong political campaign, no, and we have a lot of media that are against of this social innovation. So I think that the time, no, when you are doing these changes, no, in the political cycle, I think that it's difficult, no, to measure that. I don't know if it has understood something.
Yeah, no, this was a very important point that you raised, and thank you for contributing to the discussion and mentioning this, because it definitely is something to keep in mind. We have about 10 more minutes left, and we have one more presentation to go, but I would like to just ask, I see we have a representative from Aberdeen and we also have someone from Groningen. Just if you can give maybe a 1 or 2 sentence answer, whether you think, because you've also been involved in this process over the past 3.5 years, do you see that there is a potential market for ABM, and do you see your city using that in the future, potentially, in order to make decisions? Or at least to even open up participatory activities with citizens or residents based on the information that's then provided in the models. So I think if it's okay, Mai from Aberdeen is first on my list. If you want to just make a very short statement to show your perspective on this.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. From Aberdeen's perspective, we found the agent-based modelling very useful, and I intend to use it for the expansion of our district heating in the future. And the main barriers to that is obviously getting data or information from people like the tenants, for instance, or the householders. So in order to make better outputs from the modelling. So although we would love to use it, but a lot of things will still be based on assumptions and, you know, best case scenarios, etc. But it'll be really good if we can get better engagement. But I think it's something we can develop, obviously, with our partners in the future. So in 2 lines then, Elma, what I think is we will definitely use it, but we just have to think of better engagement plans in the future.
Thank you so much, Mai, and sorry for the rush. We would have loved to hear more.
No, thank you.
And then maybe Terry, if you can also provide 1 or 2 sentences based on your experience with the tool as well as the modeling in Groningen.
Yes, well, good afternoon, everybody. Terry from Groningen. I just wrote it also in the chat that the greatest challenge is to convince colleagues to use this innovative tools like ABM. We already had a great preview in the SMARTEES project with the Groningen case, so that's easy for us to spread the word in our organization. So it's all about our colleagues to implement it in their daily work, and then I think there are great opportunities to use these tools.
Wonderful, thank you. And we're also hoping that with tools like the Policy Sandbox tool, that this will also become easier to at least use as a base or as an example for future modeling in a city, and then to also then potentially address this data challenge. But yes, we have 7 minutes left and 1 more presentation. So I would like to now hand over to Trevor Graham, who's our 3rd and final speaker for today. Trevor is the director of Urban Island, which is a consultancy that focuses on sustainable communities and the development of economies that build social and natural capital. Trevor has over 30 years experience in sustainable development, and prior to Urban Island, his impressive resume includes having worked for 16 years at the city of Malmo on a variety of sustainability topics. So Trevor, it is a true pleasure to have you here with us today. And yes, I hand over to you.
Thank you. And you're going to take care of the screen, I presume, yeah?
I can. Let me just find the presentation.
Okay,
if
sorry, because I don't have the screen share access here by the looks of it.
We can grant it. Let me try right now. Make presenter. You should have it now.
Yeah, right, okay, sorry. I think it's, yeah, let me see. I think it's going to be complicated. It's asking me to go to permissions and all the rest of it. So I think probably we should not bother. But if you want to dig out the presentation there, and I'll start. I mean, basically what we've been looking at is how we can take all of the knowledge that's been generated through the last 3 years of working on the SMARTEES project and taking that into something that is going to be useful and accessible for cities moving ahead into the future. So something that's like living beyond the life of the project. So always this is a challenge, because at the end of the project everybody goes off and does their own things, and some people will be developing stuff on the back of the work that's been done previously, and others will be going off and doing other things. But we're looking at, well, how can we bring all this together? And what we've seen is there are 3 levels of knowledge that we've been generating through the project. One is around the sort of the lived experience of practitioners in the cities. Another is around social science research, around behavioural issues and effects on energy transition and mobility issues in cities. And the third is the agent-based modelling. So what we're looking at is how can we take those 3 levels of knowledge and make them accessible for cities into the future. So the entry level is the sandbox tool. Then we're looking at an add-on level around the Sandbox Innovation Workshop, and then we're looking at an out-of-the-box service. So I'll just quickly run through those. We'll do it very, very briefly, just to give you an overview of how we're thinking into the future. So the Sandbox tool, you basically have an opportunity to have a quick dip into and play around with. But this would be something that was basically a way of visualizing a little bit more some of the experience from the case studies, and to provide an introduction to what agent-based modeling is and how it might be applied in an urban sustainability context. And this is going to be self-explanatory, self-contained on the internet. So you can go in, you can play around with it, you can get your colleagues in to have a look at it and say, yeah, does that look interesting? Is this something that might be worth exploring further? If we go on to the next slide, Elma, thanks. We would then be looking at the possible next step. We're calling a Sandbox Innovation Workshop, but an opportunity to do something a little bit specific for a city who may have a particular challenge. So it might be, for example, well, I mean, you could take the example now of Budapest interested in the experience of Groningen around creating car-free spaces in and around a park. It could be that there would be interest of a deeper dive into the Groningen experience, into the research that's taken place around this, around the practitioner's experience of it, and around the agent-based model. So that's kind of being done within the scope of this project. But this is the kind of thing you could take to a third-party city. So if Prague was interested, for example, okay, well, let's have a look at what that may entail. Or I know in Malmö at the moment there's political discussion about superblocks. So we could be bringing in some of the experience from Vitoria Gasteiz and from Barcelona that could be useful for that. So in that case, we would be bringing together a small team. We would try to get a better understanding of the client city. What are the challenges? What are their ideas? Bring in a small team that can press some of the buttons there. Is it more practitioner focused? Is it more researcher focused? Is it more ABM focused, or is it a mixture of the 3? And then we would run a workshop and provide a policy paper as a result of that, with some ideas and some suggestions as to how the city could proceed. So that would be the next level. And then the third one, what we call the out-of-the-box support services, can be essentially pretty much anything you want it to be after that. But just looking at, well, it could be that a city would want to develop a new agent-based model, and that the skills within the consortium here could actually provide that opportunity. And it was really interesting to hear Lois's experience of transferring some of that kind of basic model architecture from Groningen to Budapest. I think that if you can get that level where it's not going to be building everything from scratch, then it actually becomes more affordable and more realistic to do. But it could also be that you want some additional support with you know, what is the latest state-of-the-art research around behavioural change and climate change, for example. How can you help define and develop policy and practice at a local level using the research? Or it could be, how has this been done in other cities, and how can we take the knowledge from those cities and implement it? What's the political process around getting the energy transition moving differently, rolling out district heating in Aberdeen, or energy efficiency work in Malmö, or super blocks, whatever it may be, bringing in. So again, we could pull together a team. It might be research heavy, it might be practitioner heavy, it might be more ABM, agent-based modeling focused, but we would be looking at bringing together that team and providing support maybe over a longer period of time. So they're the kind of 3 levels that we're developing, and the plan is that they will be available into the future. It's always hard to know what the demand for this kind of thing is going to be. There will be a small fee attached, because obviously people are going to have to put some time in and put some work in, but the idea is to basically do it on a level to be able to cover our costs. So it wouldn't be like a commercial enterprise, but more just like a cost covering exercise for the partners who were involved. So I think I'll stop there. I guess we're probably out of time for further discussion and for questions. But if anybody wants to get in touch, then you've got the contact details for the SMARTEES team here. So by all means, send us an email or questions or whatever, and we can deal with them afterwards. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Trevor. We do have one poll that Nicholas will launch right now that we would like to then close the presentations with. Just one second. It should be, yes. So which of these services that were just presented do you think could be useful for a city? So option 1 would be the Sandbox Innovation Workshop. Option 2 is the out of the sandbox services. This is the one where it would potentially include the development of a tailored model. Do you think both options are useful? Or are you not sure? Or you think none of them would be very useful for your city? So if you could just pick one of those, this is helpful for us to also know. Nicholas, how are we doing with the percentages?
Yeah, I think half have voted. Let's maybe count down from 5 silently. All right, and I think that should be all. And let me share the results. So we have, yeah, quite equal distribution for either both options, 40%, or rather the Sandbox Innovation Workshop, so the light version of the workshop, so to say, but still also 20% who think that the in-depth process does have some potential. Thank you for that, and yeah, over to Elma.
Thank you. With this, we would like to then come to an end. If anyone has any more questions, please do send us an email. We will be in contact with you again to share the presentations as well as the recording, but please feel free to always write us. Thank you so much again for sticking with us even 6 minutes beyond the allocated time. It was a pleasure to listen to you, to learn from you, and a special thank you, of course, to our wonderful speakers, without whom this event anyway would not have been possible. So thank you, everyone, and to our cities as well for being with us for the last 3.5 years. Of course, without you, none of this would have been possible either. And thank you for being here today to also share your perspectives and experiences. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Enjoy lunch, and we will be in touch with you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.